Howdy everyone, Shadowroo here, and I am your coach of the Sarasota Scissors, and today I have for you my team and battle analysis for the Woods Season 5, Week 5. This week we're up against the West Virginia Noctowls, coached by Mr. Woodsy himself. Woodsy's been around basically since the beginning. He's, shall we say, the head of this entire draft league, and last season he was kind of on a tear, so this season hopefully we can get something going on him. You know? Well, here's to hoping anyway. Looking at his team, he's got some pretty nice versatility going with it. Things like Terrakion and Necrozma can be run with a number of different spreads. Terrakion can either be a really strong setup sweeper towards the end of any given game, can be a nice wall breaker with a choice band, can be scarfed and outspeed a lot. Necrozma can set up in every way you can really think of. Arcanine, Vaporeon, Decidueye, a really strong Fire, Water, Grass core, can be run bulky or slightly more offensive between Decidueye and Arcanine. Drapion is obviously a potent Poison Dark type with really high defense, access to Swords Dance, access to Sniper so you can run a crit set. Vikavolt even is surprisingly bulky and can be run that way. And the rest of his draft is looking kind of similar to that. And of course, he got the team mascot, Mr. Noctowl. Shame it hasn't seen a game yet, but maybe we'll get lucky in the future and get graced by the MVP himself. So anyway, looking at all of this, we got our work cut out for us. If we build bulkier, there's a good chance he could bring a wall-breaking team and just tear right through us. If we build offensively, there's a chance he could build just a bulky team that can whittle us down. So we got to be very careful with how we choose to approach this. So for this week, I decided to go with Trick Room. I figured if he's offensive, this will invalidate most of his team. There's only a few things on there that really benefit more from Trick Room than I do, things like Vikavolt. So I figured it was a pretty safe bring. Even if we don't end up getting it off, we can still bulk through some of his team. So we have Jellicent this week coming back. We have pretty basic spread on it. Leftovers, Water Absorb with Scald, Strength Sap, Trick Room. Pretty similar to what we've brought before. The only difference being I decided to run Shadow Ball this week. Mostly for Decidueye, but also for Necrozma. And just to hit some other things in general that would otherwise mostly wall this thing out. Not that I'd be staying in on them if I have a choice, but it's nice to catch a switch, or if I'm going to sack it off, you know, do decent damage. Pretty basic spread as well. Max HP, max defense, relaxed nature. Not much crazy going on with this one. Not much crazy going on with the whole team, to be honest. Not until towards the end of this, but you'll see. Since we're bringing Trick Room, I figured bringing Bronzong as a second Trick Room setter would probably be a smart option, especially since with Levitate it dodges some strong EQs from things like Steelix. It walls out Terrakion pretty well. Kills really well with Gyro Ball, actually. And then, for everything else, I have decent coverage options. I have Earthquake for Drapion. Again, not that I'd stay in, but if I had to. Stealth Rocks, because they're pretty good against this team. He obviously has Decidueye to defog them away, but with things like Vikavolt and the fact that he'd probably be swapping a lot, I just can't see myself not bringing Rocks this week. Especially since he's going to also bring Rocks, so it's nice to have that ability to counter whittle him down somewhat. And of course we have Trick Room here to really get things going. Almost better than Jellicent. This thing is, I think, slower than Jellicent is. It's actually slower than Vikavolt. So of all of the Pokemon that either of us could bring, I believe Bronzong is the absolute possible slowest. So really good in Trick Room and really bulky outside of it. So again, not much else crazy going on there. For the next pick though, I figured I'm bringing Incineroar again. Intimidate is too good to not bring, and having an answer to Necrozma is really nice. Especially a physical answer to Necrozma, because Calm Mind be kind of scary. But I wanted to run Assault Vest, so I could potentially live any one hit from something and go from there, but with that I can't run Parting Shot. Makes pivoting a bit less efficient, but I still get U-turn, so at least I can keep my momentum going. I'm also running other pretty basic stuff, just knockoff for getting some items off. Obviously, Terrakion does have Justified, so hitting it with a knockoff Might not be the best thing to happen, but it also probably isn't too bad. Get some damage on it. Even if he gets +1, if he's got like a band or a scarf, get rid of it. If he has Life Orb, that helps my calcs against things like with things like Jellicent. And then Earthquake for coverage against a few things on the team, and Flare Blitz for really hard-hitting stab. Just general offensive spread. I figured I didn't want to make this thing too bulky. I would probably lose out on some kills. I mean, with this spread, I don't even guarantee to Oko max defense, max HP, bold Vikavolt. So I really can't afford to sacrifice much in attack. But after this, I figured I needed a special wall breaker for something. For a few things, rather, excuse me. Not to mention a solid answer to Decidueye, swap into Vikavolt, that sort of thing. So I figured I'd go with Toxtricity. I was debating Specs, but I figured if he has Steelix on the team, I can't really freely click Specs Overdrive or Specs Volt Switch. So I figured Life Orb will give me relatively the same amount of damage, and Boom Burst on a physically defensive Steelix actually does a lot of damage, so it's not a bad idea to bring Life Orb, I think, this week. Otherwise, pretty basic Toxtricity set. The same one you'll probably see most weeks when I bring this, unless I really, really decide Shift Gear is where it's at. But, yeah, biggest problem with Toxtricity is its lack of a move pool. Hopefully the DLC coming up changes that, but for now, we out here. Let's go. Next up, the MVP from last week has made a recurrence. We have Pangoro, with another Iron Fist set with Life Orb. Parting Shot for pivoting, Bullet Punch for important priority against things like Terrakion. It's actually a 2-hit KO against Terrakion, especially after Rocks. I think it's guaranteed after Rocks. Knockoff for just a really strong Dark Stab to, again, handle Necrozma. And Drain Punch to keep myself nice and healthy. Hit things like Steelix, Terrakion with Drain Punch, just keep myself healthy. And then again, the Dark Fighting Stab actually covers most of his team, believe it or not. Decidueye particularly takes a lot from Knockoff, even if it's defensive, so Pangoro just seemed like the right thing to bring. Obviously, I'm lacking Earthquake, so against Drapion, my best move is going to be Drain Punch, but I figure it still does decent enough damage to warrant bringing, and Drapion, aside from maybe crit Cross Poison, which could do a lot, that's really the only thing it can do, and if it's not a Swords Dance spread, probably won't do that much, so we out here. And for the final pick, my bad. For the final pick, I figured with this one, I needed a guaranteed answer to Terrakion. I didn't think he was going to bring Scarf, since he does, by default, outspeed everything on my draft. Mew is my fastest thing, of course, but even at max speed, Timid Nature does not outspeed max speed Terrakion. So I figured, well, I'm going to build for max speed, or not non-max speed. I'm going to build for non-scarfed Terrakion. And for that, I figured I'm going to bring Scarf. Turns out, I didn't actually need to invest anything in speed for Scarf to outspeed Terrakion. That's kind of crazy in my opinion. I had several stat points to spare, actually, with just no speed investment whatsoever. So we take those. Pretty basic spread overall. Psyshock for hitting some things like Vaporeon that are too specially defensive to take damage from Psychic. Terrakion still takes heaps from Psyshock. If he's like Assault Vest Vikavolt, I could bring Psyshock to maybe whittle that thing down a little bit better, since I don't have the move slot for Fire Blast. I decided to run Volt Switch to keep my momentum going. Shadow Ball to hit things like Decidueye again, and also Necrozma if he hasn't set up yet. And Earth Power to cover pretty much everything else. Drapion, Steelix, that sort of thing. So, all around, Mew is just here to be a fast presence to punch some holes in his team on very specific threats and let everything else come in and do the work afterwards. So with that, that's what we're looking at for this week. We are hoping to get Trick Room up, get decent damage on his team, and let things like Pangoro, Incineroar, that sort of thing come in and just at the end of the battle clean up what's left and call it a day. So with that, I think that's all I really have to say about this team. And I'm going to turn it over to the battle replay. So I will see y'all in just a second. Alrighty, here we are. So we are here with this battle against Mr. Noctowl, and looking at his team, he brought a good amount of what we expected him to. He brought Arcanine over Necrozma, though. I'm pretty sure that's a good thing. Necrozma is a threat, for sure. That thing hits like a truck even without setup. He also did not bring Vaporeon, so that's a bit of a relief. Vaporeon does kind of wall out a good amount of my team, and with things like Jellicent not being able to touch it, it's probably for the best that he did not bring that. So without further ado, let's dive right in. So I figured with this particular team, especially since no Vaporeon, I figured Incineroar was probably the safest lead, regardless of what he did. He led Drapion, I got the Intimidate off, I'm like, cool. Earthquake won't kill, so I'm just going to fire off my own Earthquake. Even if he swaps into like Vikavolt or Decidueye, he's going to die to a Flare Blitz or something like that. So I do heaps to Arcanine even despite being -1, and even though he Morning Suns back up, that tells me that he's probably an offensive set. So I go into Mew, click Earth Power, does heaps, but he kills himself with Flare Blitz, so that's cool. Here he goes into Drapion, presumably thinking that he would outspeed or something like that, but I go for Earth Power a second time. Mew at this point, I wouldn't say is useless, but I don't necessarily need it, I think, and it's probably better than something else taking a knockoff, so Scarfed Earth Power puts Drapion in a bit of an awkward position. It dies if I get Rocks up, that sort of thing, so he swaps it out, I guess, for Jellicent later, but in swapping to Decidueye, I'm not sure what he expected me to do, but Knockoff just immediately KOs him, so that's really, really cool. He cannot get Rocks off the field. If I can get them up later, they are here to stay. So he goes into Vikavolt, I swap out into Toxtricity, basically to take whatever he does. He Volt switches into Steelix. So I figured I'd take this moment to go into Bronzong and maybe set up a few things on him, but he goes for Taunt, which is funny because in practice, my practice partner told me, watch out for Taunt, and that's the one thing that I didn't watch out for and I got hit by, so good job, me. But it's probably fine. He goes for Thunderbolt. I thought he would swap. I'm not sure why I thought he would swap. Maybe reading my swap, I thought he'd Volt Switch, but he did not do that. He stayed in and clicked Thunderbolt. However, he gets a low roll on the second one, just as my Taunt wears off. Got a little lucky there, of course. And we are able to not only get Trick Room up, but finally get our Rocks up. So he now has a little bit of pressure to end this game without swapping too much. I figured I'd go into Incineroar, see what he did, go for Flare Blitz. It's probably safe. Well, didn't quite work out that way. He Volt switched out, so it turns out in Trick Room he actually prepped for it and was faster than my whole team. So that's fun on a Pokemon with a special attack as high as that. But he goes into Steelix after sacking off Drapion, so good on him. The Flare Blitz didn't connect with anything, and I figured I'm going to sack off Toxtricity here, because especially since nothing else really wants to come in, don't really have a swap. So I sack off Toxtricity here and go into Pangoro. With Pangoro, I figure I can fire off a knockoff. I don't really care if he goes into Terrakion, because I can Bullet Punch it or something like that, and he can't exactly set up on me. It's not free, but he does not do that. He stays in, and again, I thought he'd swap out, figuring Vikavolt would come in, and in both the times where I thought he'd swap, Vikavolt would have been really bad for me, would have outsped in Trick Room. Well, Trick Room wasn't up there, but Vikavolt in general, suffice to say, would have been very, very scary. So at this point, he finally swaps into it, and I fired off a Scald. I did get the burn, which is cool. It's nice chip damage on him. Means that I can probably kill him at some point, if I'm lucky. So I swap in Incineroar here, about to sack it off, just thinking it'd be nice if it lived, but I think Pangoro is going to be my win condition here. And knowing that Pangoro, despite being minimum speed, Brave Nature, actually outspeeded him, I figured, well, I can go into this thing, and basically anything I do is pretty free. I go for Knockoff again, just in case he stayed in, but it does not kill. It instead, he goes into Steelix, but I finally kill this thing with Drain Punch. I'm not trying to read with Knockoff again. He quite clearly is not going to bring in the Vikavolt. So he goes into Terrakion here, and I click Bullet Punch thinking, if he sets up, great, we win. If he does not set up and kills me, then I could go into Jellicent and just Scald him. According to him, that's what he would have done if Vikavolt wasn't burned, so that Jellicent could not kill after Rocks. So apparently, I guess he was a Salt Vest or something like that, but either way, Pangoro is here to close out the W with the knockoff. So we did it. We pulled out a victory, 2-0 over Mr. Noctowl, and I'm feeling pretty good about that. He was another one of the people that I really wanted to pull a win over. I had never played him before, but much like the Abakirk Manetrix, I really wanted to get a win over them just to prove that, you know, it's possible that I can do it, that I maybe am not ass for once, but we did it. So that's cool. We're finally back on our winning side. We are currently 3-2, and here's to hoping Here's to hoping that those 2 losses are the only 2 this season, and we can maybe make it to playoffs or something like that. So if you're watching this, Woodsy, good games. That was really fun. And to all of the other people in the woods, good luck moving into Week 6. As always, I am Shadowroo, and I will see you next time. Cheers, folks.